Okay, finally, we are just 1 week or just a little over a week away from the culmination of America 250 celebrations coming on July the 4th. The nation's semi-quincentennial, which is a really hard word to say, commemorates the 250th anniversary of the Revolutionary Era and the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Kind of a pivotal moment to reflect on our nation's history, a pretty big deal. I remember in 1989 when we were celebrating Washington's 100th anniversary, when we were entered into the Union in 1889. And that was a big deal here in Washington. This is so much bigger, celebrating our nation's history. Now, planners of Washington state's participation in this, lots of events going on in Washington. Some school districts have been marking it for many months. Certain communities have had celebrations, fairs, and the like. But a year ago, I started kind of paying attention to this and watching how Washington State's planning committee was coming together. They had public meetings, and many of them were available on TVW to kind of monitor the planning. And Lieutenant Governor Denny Heck has been chairing the planning committee for how Washington would celebrate. And I found it very interesting when I watched one of these planning meetings a little less than a year ago, back on July the 11th. And at that point, I wrote about it because I watched that meeting. And at the time, there were members of Washington's 250 committee that very much wanted to make it about, okay, maybe America isn't such a great place to be. Maybe we need to make sure everybody revisits harms of the past. And one of the members of that committee is Representative Christine Reeves, Democrat from Federal Way. And she said during that July 11th, 2025 planning meeting, we'll put this up. She said, not everybody's excited about celebrating America. Just making sure that we're taking that delicate balance between celebrating our country and recognizing that that also meant manifest destiny, which meant slavery, which also meant a lot of other things critical to the heritage and history of that founding. Well, in that meeting, and again, Christine Reeves was not the only member that kind of wanted to go that direction of let's make this about harms of the past, not a celebration. Well, Lieutenant Governor Denny Heck was having no part of that. I watched the entire thing, and at least 4 times in that meeting, he either interrupted other members or said, "Let me state again, sure, we should, reflect on harms and not repeat those mistakes of the past so we can all acknowledge the things that have been done to minority community members, but let's not make it all about that on America's 250th." So I reached back out to him this week to say, okay, so here we are. How did the rest of the planning go? Are you satisfied with how all of Washington's 250 celebrations are coming down? And this is part of what he shared with me in a Wednesday interview.
And you will recall that there was a period of time some time ago I was there I admitted to some discouragement. And the way I've characterized this is that there were some people who wanted the 250 celebration to be some kind of hyperbolic nationalistic celebration, and other people who wanted it to be this history interrogation on steroids. And what I have maintained from the beginning is there's plenty of room to reflect back on our past and our mistakes and what we learned from them and how we can do better, while at the same time celebrating this country's exceptional journey over a quarter of a millennium. And what really got me into a pretty positive frame of mind is the closer we got, the more community oriented the celebrations became. And they frankly, and this is not hyperbole, just fill my heart with joy when I think about all the things that are going on in communities around the state, above and beyond traditional July 4th celebrations, but also now the 250th celebration. It's such a wonderful time, really. I for a very long time, decades, I've been a member of a book club, and I really insisted that our most recent book be Walter Isaacson's the greatest sentence ever written, which is, of course, a reference to the second sentence in the Declaration of Independence. And when I think about this year, I think it's just such a rich opportunity to remember and reflect on our why and on our who we are. And I think it's a wonderful thing.
So, given the opportunity to interview Lieutenant Governor Denny Heck, and I've been trying for weeks, and I credit his handlers because he's got a very busy schedule. I mean, he's the guy who steps in when Governor Ferguson's busy. They finally made it happen on Wednesday, and I'm very grateful for that. But I couldn't miss the opportunity to ask him about the movement of his party on a national level. Of course, here in Washington, we have a socialist Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson. And just this week, we had primary candidates advancing on in other states who are embracing, the whole DSA platform. So when I asked him about that, he initially said, I don't want to respond, but I pushed him a little further and said, hey, wait a minute. I feel like this is relevant for today and what we're talking about with the celebration of America's 250, which seems to be antithetical to really everything that the DSA movement is embracing.
I have concerns for my country, and some of them I'm fairly confident you would not share. But what I choose to do is focus on the things that we have in common. What I choose to do is to remind ourselves that our nation's motto is E pluribus unum, out of many one. And it begs or prompts the question, what is that? And what that is our why and our who. It gets back to that greatest sentence ever written. There's no question that we are living through a time that is particularly polarized, even when held up against other periods in our history. Um, but that should not stop us from remembering why it is that we came together as a nation. And as I believe I've said to you before, and why I kind of resist a lot of times getting engaged in these kinds of conversations is because I believe two things. I believe we don't have to hate each other just because we disagree. And I believe you cannot love America if you hate half of Americans. And I would say that about both sides of the debate, Carlene. We are, at the end of the day, all Americans.
So I will tell you just from my personal perspective, Lieutenant Governor Denny Heck, a Democrat, is a very reasonable man, a very reasonable politician. I have a lot of respect for how he presides over the Senate. And we spent some time talking about that. He knows, Republicans were in the minority in Olympia. And so presiding over the Senate and deciding how some of those arguments go on the floor, which is oftentimes the only time that Republicans have to stand up and voice their objections to progressive legislation moving forward, offering amendments, sometimes holding things up for hours because that's the only way they can have their voices heard. He said he has a lot of respect for that process. And my observation, just personally, has been that he handles that with the kind of proper decorum that is due in Olympia. So that is a wrap on today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily for this Thursday, June the 25th of 2026. Tomorrow, World Cup back in Seattle, and we're just over a week away from celebrating America 250. So, hope you get out to enjoy some time with your family and friends this weekend. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you again on Friday.